Good evening and welcome to the Bellingham City Council regular meeting. Today is Monday, August 24th, 2026. I'm going to call the meeting to order and begin with roll call.
Holly Huffman.
Here.
Dan Himmel.
Here.
Skip Williams.
Here.
Lisa Anderson.
Here.
Michael Lilliquist.
Here.
Jay Scotton.
Here.
Hannah Stone.
Here.
All council members are present.
Thank you very much. The Bellingham City Council meets all requirements of the State of Washington Open Public Meetings Act. Before we begin, we acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lummi, Nooksack, Samish, and Simiamu people, who have cared for and tended this land since time immemorial. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We pay respect to their elders, both past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. The Bellingham City Council provides Spanish interpretation at all regular evening meetings. Interpretation can be accessed by in-person attendees by utilizing the headsets located at the front of the room. Remote viewers can log on to cob.org/CC Zoom and click on the language icon at the bottom of the screen to listen in Spanish.
El Ayuntamiento de Bellingham provee interpretación en español. Sus reuniones vespertinas ordinarias, los asistentes presenciales pueden acceder a la interpretación utilizando los auriculares ubicados al frente de la sala. Quienes deseen participar de forma remota pueden conectarse a cob.org/cczoom y hacer clic en el icono de idioma en la parte inferior de la pantalla para escuchar en español.
Our next council meeting will be held on September 14th, 2026. So this evening we are beginning first with a public hearing. This is Agenda Bill 25027. A public hearing on an ordinance relating to land use and planning, amending Title 20 of the Bellingham Municipal Code, creating a new chapter 20.29A titled Low Income Housing Development Incentive, removing and reducing zoning-based development regulations for low-income housing in all residential multi-urban village and commercial zones. This ordinance proposes adoption of the Low-Income Housing Development Incentive, a new chapter within Title 20 of the Bellingham Municipal Code, intended to facilitate the development of permanently affordable housing by reducing regulatory barriers and streamlining approvals for qualifying low-income housing projects. The proposed incentive would exempt eligible developments from certain zoning and land use regulations, while maintaining applicable health, safety, environmental, and infrastructure standards. Qualifying projects must provide long-term affordability for households earning less than 80% of the area median income, also known as AMI. A Type 6 public review process is required for these development code amendments. Following a public hearing on July 9th, 2026, the Planning Commission recommended approval of the proposed code changes to the City Council. So we'll begin this evening with Community Economic Development Manager Tara Sundin.
Good evening. Tara Sundin. I'm joined by Kurt Nabefeld. We both work in the Planning and Community Development Department, and we're co-presenting. I'm going to keep my comments brief because you read the full summary statement. So as you know, our affordable housing partners, our affordable housing developers, specifically the nonprofit ones, struggle with getting these projects off the ground. Costs remain high. The financing that they use is fairly complicated. As you know, there's quite deep subsidy that goes into these projects. And from time to time, we find that the land use regulations are either adding a little complexity, maybe a little delay, sometimes more cost. And so Kurt and I have been talking about bringing this forward for a while, even before the parking regulations were no longer an issue. So we're pleased to be presenting this. It's a pretty straightforward proposal, and summary statement was pretty robust on what's eligible, but it is that simple. If a project, and I'll describe projects for you all that are familiar to you and those that the community might be familiar with, that this would apply to. They would apply to something like Cedar Commons that's currently being built out by Bellis Fair, the Aloha in the Samish Way neighborhood or Samish Commons, the Trailview at Barkley Village, Eleanor downtown. These are familiar developments to our community. These projects typically are in the 4 to 5 story range. And I say that because we are recommending that we remove height limits as a constraint, but we know what kind of bandwidth the financing affords these projects. Right now, we're seeing development usually in the 4 story range, and that's because the tax credit program is a little weak right now. They're not as valuable as they are sometimes. And just pushing that, there's a little extra cost to go into 5th story. For those that think that all of a sudden we're going to see 8-story buildings or 10-story buildings, I can assure you that these housing developers cannot afford to go into that type of construction, which would be a lot more costly. We're also proposing that in order for the developers to be eligible, they're already partnered with the city. So these are the projects I speak of. They need to be in the city's consolidated plan. And as you know, that's a plan that you all approve. So these are, this is pretty targeted to a small number of projects in our community, and it's purposeful in that way. Council Chair Stone mentioned the permanent affordability. We think that there is a really solid anyways, we're providing some flexibility for the development in return for a public benefit that is long-term affordability. So a covenant would be recorded on these properties, and the properties would be permanently affordable for a 50-year period. So we think that's a pretty solid trade-off. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kurt to summarize the code changes.
Great, thank you, Tara. So Tara really hit kind of the first bullet on the slides that you're seeing tonight, the why. These new rules would apply citywide, but they would only apply through our urban village, commercial, and residential multi-zones. They would not be allowed in residential single zones. And really kind of getting at to the meat of the document here, the ordinance, is it's really setting back and reducing the development standards. I'm going to walk through those development standards so we can get a good overview of what would apply and what wouldn't apply in these areas. As Tara mentioned, height, we are recommending no height limit except within certain view corridors. We've got several of those in the waterfront and the Old Town areas. I'll just show a couple quick slides. These are in our Old Town areas where through those Old Town or through those urban village plans, we've adopted specific view corridors that we wanted to maintain and kept heights lower in those areas. So these new no rules, no height regulations would not apply in those areas where we've already adopted certain limits. Many of our, or I should say, most of our areas within the city include either a density requirement, so that density is the number of units per amount of land that you have. Some of our urban villages have floor area ratio requirements, which again, these things are really kind of intended to keep the scale of the buildings a little bit smaller. We are recommending that there be no maximum floor areas or densities in these areas. We want to be able to let these designers develop these buildings or design these buildings in a way that maximizes the total unit count, because that's really what we've seen is whether it be parking or a setback standard or a height limitation, we see to get a reduction in units. And so we're really trying to encourage more units and trying to eliminate some of those barriers. When it does come back to setbacks, we are wanting to make sure that we still maintain those underlying setbacks so that they are the same as the buildings that would be constructed nearby. Lot coverage, we're getting away from lot coverage as well. Remember, a lot of these the buildings that are being built in our more urbanized areas, such as the commercial zones or in our urban village areas. So no maximum lot coverage requirements. We are recommending some usable space in certain areas. That usable space for people, it's a private usable space, but it can be joined to be a common usable space. We're looking at 100 square feet per dwelling unit, except within our urban villages, because most of our urban villages do not require that usable space now. We did throw in an alternative here, which is something that we've been looking at for quite some time now, and that's when we have buildings or units that are located near a park or some other type of facility where the residents can actually go out to recreate someplace else or get that open space. And so that alternative here to providing that is if the project is located within a quarter mile of a park, then they don't have to provide that 100 square feet per unit. Parking, as you know, you've already passed those rules and regulations, so there's no auto parking that would be required for these projects. There will still be ADA and electric vehicle charging stations would still be required when parking is provided. And then as a part of the recent parking regulations that were adopted, there are citywide bike parking standards, which we are recommending stay with these projects. Landscaping, we're keeping those rules the same as underlining zoning. And then we do believe that these projects should still go through some sort of design review. As you are aware, the state has recently required jurisdictions to go to an objective standard, which the city currently has an interim ordinance in place. So we've gotten rid of the subjectivity when it comes to design review, and it's very straightforward, objective standards. And just on a side note, we've, just from a staff perspective and a developer perspective, those interim rules seem to be working very well. Staff says that they're not taking as much time to do these types of reviews, and the development community knows exactly what they need to do because it's quite clear. So we believe, again, that design review is important for these buildings. It should still go through that process. And finally, I just wanted to reiterate the Planning Commission held a public hearing on July 9th. They did recommend approval with a 5-0 review. We believe, in summary, that staff believes that the proposal offers a very targeted way to use the city's land use regulations to support a very important community priority, which is increasing the supply of low-income housing while maintaining health, safety, and environmental and infrastructure standards. We therefore recommend that you adopt the Planning Commission's findings, conclusions, and recommendations and pass the ordinance tonight. We are available for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for the presentation. As you noted, we're first here for a public hearing. So are there any clarifying questions before we receive that public hearing testimony? Then we'll bring it back for discussion at the close. Any questions? Okay. Seeing none, we will open the public hearing, and I'll turn to the clerk to read the first names.
All right, we had 4 individuals signed up. First up was Adam Bellinger, it's Jess or Tess Muller, Mary Lou White, and then Pete Day.
Good evening, council, staff, and community members. My name is Adam Bellinger. I am broadly supportive of this recommendation for the low-income housing development incentive. What I would suggest, though, is that there be tracking of the actual costs to build going forward of these affordable housing projects relative on a per unit basis relative to the private sector. There's a pretty big differential of when I look at projects that have been done in the last few years. It's roughly about $500,000 a unit to build an affordable housing project, and yet the private sector is able to do it for $330,000 roughly lately in the last few years. That's a pretty big differential, and if we're not getting the actual costs reduced for the affordable housing, we need to keep looking for ways to get it down lower. And there's a lot of factors that go into affordable housing, as I'm sure you're aware of some of those. But I think we really need to track how this looks going forward as we see the impacts on the development piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
Jess or Tess Mullen or Muller, Mary Lou White, and Pete Day. You're all welcome to come up to the mic. Yeah.
I don't have my written comment because I couldn't get off the computer today, and as usual, I'm not organized. But you guys have gotten my comments more than once. You know my concerns with regard to mining, my concerns regard to this burden it places on the people who are paying taxes here because it's deeply financed and doesn't give the financial return for that finance. I didn't say what ordinance it is because it's not on the sheet I was given. Likewise, I got this on July 25th, but if I were somebody who had not been on the board as an alternate, I would not be able to reach this until 7 days before the meeting to find out anything about it. So that's just another thing on the side, and I think it's in my notes. With regard to the mining in particular, because I live in a mining area, historic mining area, I'm concerned because the voids aren't equal across the city. And that's why we shouldn't have a regulation that's equal across the city. I'm also concerned with regard to the environmental factor because these units, city is saying is roughly 4 to 5 now, but they acknowledge they'll be at least up to 6. They acknowledged at the last meeting, if it's on record, I don't know if it's on record, but it could be on video, that there's really no regulations any longer, so that these will end up ultimately possibly going into residential neighborhoods. I would also like to place it on record, any notes that I put in at that meeting, this meeting, and potentially the 2701 Birchwood neighborhood planned housing that I also provided the council with documentation on with regard to the risks for stormwater drainage. I think the council knows that the city has infrastructure that's over 100 years old and that these large structures put in on infrastructure that wasn't developed for that could lead to backwatering and sewage backups in homes, which has happened in Bellingham several times this year. It will also potentially lead to blackouts where you don't get electricity or you have a restriction on your electricity or water. So I think we need to look at this more carefully and that it should be subject to due diligence. And I think having a broad thing that isn't subject to due diligence doesn't cover that. I also would like to say with regard to the SEPA comment, that I noticed in the SEPA comment that the city has decided to give away our wildlife for the outskirts of the Bellingham. And I don't think that's good for the health and safety of the citizens of Bellingham. And I don't think that we were asked about that either with regard to that.
Thank you, Mary Lou. Your time
I
is up.
welcome the council to talk to me.
Thank you, Mary Lou.
Good evening, council members and neighbors, city staff. My name is Pete Day. I live in the Birchwood neighborhood as well. And I also am here representing Compass Housing Alliance, which is a regional nonprofit affordable housing developer. And I'm not going to take much of your time this evening, but I did want to offer support for this ordinance and underscore just how important regulatory updates like this are to making affordable housing possible in our community. So from a developer's standpoint, in broad strokes, an ordinance like this serves to increase certainty for us, which is a huge deal, so that we can plan effectively and know at the outset of feasibility, exploring whether a project is even possible. We need clarity on what the rules are, what the land use regulations are. And oftentimes what ends up happening is we go in, to a community that has more restrictive land use regulations, and there's a lot of back and forth with the city that takes a lot of time to understand what those regulations are and how we can work with them. So I appreciate the clarity that this ordinance offers. And secondly, I just want to call out the ways that an ordinance like this really does reduce development costs substantially. And there are substantial soft costs and hard costs associated with pursuing variances, which is often the case when building affordable housing, negotiating design allowances and paying consultants and legal fees to work those things out. So there's definitely cost savings there. And I'll call out a regulatory change like this allows more of each affordable housing dollar to be spent on actually building affordable homes as opposed to servicing the cost of administrative burden, essentially, right? So I want to thank Tara and Kurt and the city staff for their work on this ordinance. I feel that it does a good job of balancing the urgency of the need in our community with appropriate safeguards for responsible community development. And I'll just call out clauses like the long-term affordability condition that's in the ordinance, as well as the city funding and consolidated action plan condition as well, as examples of great safeguards that I appreciate are in there. So thank you, Tara and Kurt, and thank you, Council, for entertaining this ordinance.
Thank you, Pete.
Jess or Tess? Okay.
Are there any, so is there anyone else on the list?
Jess or Tess, but they're not stepping up.
They haven't responded. Okay. Is there anyone else here this evening who would like to speak to this
I would.
item?
Thank you.
Yes.
Hello, everybody. You guys are in my wheelhouse when you start talking about affordable housing, but a couple of things I want to bring up. I didn't have my notes either. My computer decided to crash. What I want to highlight is what's the cost of the affordable housing that we do. And I wish that we would keep a record of the increased regulatory cost, which they're going to try and get rid of. But really, there's hidden costs that nobody really wants to talk about. And there's about 92 properties that are in Whatcom County right now that pay no property tax. And what you'll find is there's a lot of like an apartment complex that is near me or my work on Woburn, where they were paying $150,000 a year in property taxes. And then about 2 or 3 years ago, magically, they paid zero. And so I want everybody reminded that there isn't some magic budget tree that just drops $100 bills for us to get what we want. People have to be taxed to get that money. People have to pay money out of their own, incomes. And I'm telling you that there's a cost to this. And when you say affordable housing, I want you to know, and this is no offense to anybody, I feel like people are saying it like my kids would say when they were little, and we didn't have the money, and they said, just write a check. Because they had no real comprehension of what that meant. And I want everybody to I'm here to remind everybody that there's a cost when you're talking about affordable housing. There's a cost to your land use policies. There's a cost to your hoarding of land through the greenways and other purchases on available land, like in the U Street corridor that Bellingham owns like 50% of. There's the cost of the tree ordinances. There's the cost of everything. And it all just stacks. And it makes it a very unaffordable place. And I want you to remember, this isn't just evil. I mean, developers do a God's work. They do a vital thing for our community. What happens is that we don't have jobs. Like, where's your teachers going to go? Where are they going to live? Are they going to live in 200 square foot places? Are they going to want to live here? I want you to remember last time I said that Whatcom County, number one export we have is our children. That's from Lyle Sorensen. I want you to think about that when you're talking about these issues, that it's people's futures and people's ability to live here. But in reality, I believe that Bellingham had 42 projects or something in the last couple of years that got the tax break for being in these corridors. Not one of them had low-income housing. They could do market rent. So I want you to say that there's a cost to all this. And then finally, I want you to know that there's like $3 million worth of tax that's going away from people that aren't being collected. So when you do these low-income projects, let's keep a running total of what they cost. And it's not just hiding subsidies from people not paying taxes or projects. Thank you,
Brian. Thank you, Brian. Is there anyone else here this evening who would like to speak to the topic of this specific public hearing? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to council for discussion. Councilmember Anderson.
So I don't have any specific questions. I think it's pretty well written through. Generally, we would send this on to a work session if there's a lot of questions. Just to share, I remember a project on Sandwich Way, the Sandwich Commons, and as a neighborhood leader, we worked really hard to help secure that property. And then, again, as two neighborhoods, Seahome and York, we really lobbied that affordable housing would go into that part of our community. And thankfully, it was awarded to Bellingham Housing Authority. And then as time went on, I was on the Planning Commission. And when the property was designed and ready to go, they were just outside the corridor for kind of the unlimited height. So there was a height limit for them. And they could save a substantial amount of money if they were able to use some like pre-engineered prefab parts. And so they were going to be 6 feet above the height limit, 6 or 8 feet above the height limit. So to try to save the money, they went to the neighborhoods and talked about trying to increase the height, of which both neighborhoods were fully supported. And we kept asking them, could you even go higher? But they explained to us that the cost of going from stick and board to engineered and manufactured, like metals and stuff, just greatly increased the cost that they would not be able to get funding. And so they had to go the route of delaying and then going through the Planning Commission to have the Planning Commission agree that the height should be changed. And then eventually that came to at least 2 of the council members here to vote for it, Councilmember Lillquist and Councilmember Hamel. And that caused a pretty significant delay for 6 feet and them being able to save enough money to be able to afford to put it in. And I understand the cost associated to not getting taxes or perhaps additional staff time, but our largest segment of unmet housing needs are going to be those people under 80% AMI. And so our for-profit development doesn't address that. And the city only has so much money to develop it on our own. So any opportunity we have to assist to cut down some of that administrative cost, the extra engineering cost. I used to be worried about height, making sure that it fit within what was in that corridor or that neighborhood. But the reality is, the more I understand about the engineering and the development costs, we're really not going to see anything above 4 stories. because our nonprofit, they can't get that level of funding. That is more of a for-profit, and this is not what it's covering. So I'm not worried about the height coming in and being an issue in the areas that are allowed. And I could maybe not get a second, and this is unusual for me to make a motion to approve without necessarily sending it to committee, but I think this is a pretty straightforward and necessary, and grateful that this is coming forward. So I move approval of the adoption of the ordinance for the first and second reading.
Second. Motion was made by Councilmember Anderson and a second by Councilmember Huffman. Discussion? Councilmember Lillquist.
I think there's a lot about this ordinance that I love, but I think there's also a major problem, which I would like to address before we vote on it. This what it basically does is it says by relaxing height rules or getting rid of them, density rules or getting rid of them, or lot coverage rules or getting rid of them, you can build bigger. You can build up the edges of your lot so long as you deal with stormwater issues. You go as high as you want so long as you have well-engineered building and as long as you don't block view corridors. All this makes a great deal of sense to me. I'm not sure about the open space thing. I can't tell if it's more generous or more forgiving, but I think that's a minor deal. My problem is that in the name of removing restrictions, we're creating a new restriction. We're creating the opposite of flexibility in a way which I don't think was thought through. The problem is that during our comp plan discussion, we talked about the value and the utility of mixed income projects and how mixed income projects are disfavored by the way we keep writing our rules. So that we keep writing rules which creates low income poor people housing or anything else. And we don't allow possibility of mixtures of incomes. The way this is written, it prevents that possibility. It's the opposite of flexibility. It actually excludes an option of mixed housing, which I think runs counter to our comp plan policy 816. So on the applicability chapter, 2029A-020, section C, it says only projects proposing 100% low-income housing are eligible for the incentive provisions herein. I think that's a mistake. I think we should allow this if a project has the majority of low-income units, 60% or some other number. We can talk about it. But why are we excluding mixed-income projects? We want housing that's affordable, and we also want mixed-income housing projects. We could get all three if we just rewrote the applicability section. So I would like to talk about that and maybe amend it before voting on the amendment, on the ordinance.
Councilmember Lillquist, is that a formal motion or anything, or at this point you just want?
At this point, I want to open a discussion.
Okay. Councilmember Cotton.
I love this ordinance. I think it's so smart, and thank you for the work to bring it forward. Okay, I have one technical question. How much work is it for the city to confirm a covenant has been recorded? Are you just copied on an email, or do the staff have to run down to the courthouse? Like, how much staff time is that component?
I don't do that part, but my team does, and we do require covenants anytime we loan on a project, so that's something that we do routinely.
I can answer. It's actually relatively minimal. We draft up the covenant. It's very standard. We require the developer or the applicant to record it. So they get it, they walk across the street, record it, bring us back a copy. We have a copy. It stays in the file.
Okay, I've always been curious, so thank you for answering that. But I do think it informs my reaction to your comments, Councilor Lillquist. That question around whether or not this should be expanded to maybe incentivize participation in the 12-year MFT was brought up in the Planning Commission meeting. I do think we would have to kind of get down to that maybe level of percentage, like a 20%, for that really to pencil in most cases. But I do think we are getting a lot in exchange for this. Like, we're talking about a 50-year covenant for affordability. So in that sense, for that extra affordability, we're actually getting a lot more on top of the 12-year MFT. So I think it's maybe a really smart idea. I understand that, this is providing a lot of additional flexibility, and there might be some concerns about how that plays out, but I think the fact this is limited to multifamily zones makes me feel a lot more comfortable. And also, we just desperately need affordable units, and it seems like we're getting a lot for what we're given here. So I'm generally supportive of Councilmember Lillquist and happy to continue that conversation in committee or now, if folks have thoughts.
Councilmember Anderson?
I am supporting. Yes. Sorry.
So, I too would love to see what I call, not the silos of poverty, but I just questioned how much time and work it would be to come back with what is the right mix? Is it 50% affordability? Is it 20% affordability? Things have to pencil out for the developer, not just the nonprofit, because if you're doing mix, often it's not the nonprofit. It might be a nonprofit partnering with a for-profit development. I think conversations would need to be had so we had the right mix to make it make sense. And I'm just wondering, and this might be to Director Lyons, who's typing away there, does it make more sense to pass this as it is and then come back? Because I know your guys' work agenda after what was presented at the shared joint meeting is quite extensive. And so I worry about delaying something and then having a bunch of questions that go into a work session that could go into a work session into work session to make it pencil out. Does it make sense to maybe delay this and have you come back with any questions we're going to be forming now? Or does it make sense to perhaps, if the council supports it, to pass it and then come back with an amendment when it fits into your work schedule? Because I would like to see the opportunity for mixed, but I also think if we're looking at good opportunity, we might want to consider some of those tax incentives in tandem with changes, and it may not necessarily be with this, it might be with another ordinance that comes forward. So I guess some direction how you think might be best to reach maybe a shared goal of incentivizing more mixed income housing.
I'll let Tara respond first, and then
I'll start. We do have a project in the pipeline that is stuck at the moment, that one of our affordable housing developers, and it's a height issue. So we would like to see action, and if the council wants to expand. So this is, the reason why it says 100% affordable is when we're funding projects, that's the realm that we're in, and especially in the rental product. It doesn't mean that, by the way, a developer couldn't propose a mixed-use development and we partially fund, and they would just follow the rules that are there in the underlying zoning. So what we said to Planning Commission is if you want to contemplate expansion, we're talking about a really different scope. If we're talking about the 12-year expansion that is like citywide now. So, and we just don't really know what to expect with that program. So I'd urge adoption and then come back later.
I would offer one other consideration, and that is the two worlds of having an applicant who is an affordable housing developer and a market rate housing developer don't blend as much as you would think. They are almost, I don't want to say they're exclusive, because that wouldn't be a fair statement either, but they are unique and disciplined in their own right. And so having an idea of making them collaborate and do that kind of stuff is great in theory, but it's a little more difficult in practice. And so I would not want us to necessarily hold up the projects that Tara is talking about to kind of force that endeavor.
Councilmember Lillquist?
Yeah, I must have spoken very poorly. I'm not saying we should require mixed use. I'm saying that we should allow mixed use. Saying at least, say, 60% means you could do 100%. No one has to do mixed use. If you like this proposal, which gives the incentive to 100%, then you might like it better if it also allowed another number when it was mixed use. So we don't need to come up with the right number. If someone wants to come in and you only do 100% affordable, you can get it. You can get it. You can get it tomorrow. Whoever's lined up to do it, they can get it tomorrow if we pass it tonight. Well, 15 days. I'm suggesting we add flexibility. We add the possibility. I'm not saying only projects with exactly or at least some number, right? Or, a mixed market rate. I'm saying at least this percentage has to be affordable. It could be 100% if you want. So I'm making it permissive language, not mandatory language. So I think I want to clear that up. And you still may not like the idea, but I'm also confused with the staff saying, oh, we can fund a mixed-use project now. We would just do 100% of a funding of the 80% of the units that are affordable? That requires them to divide up their project. Why make it hard on them? Why not just have them show us the unit count? If we already think we can do it, and then going to Mr. Lyons' point, they're really well taken. There are two different worlds of for-profit and non-profit, and putting them together is a challenge. But we keep saying we want it, so why would we create a new roadblock of our own making? One more reason you can't do mixed use. So I'm saying let's get rid of this roadblock, not require mixed use, but at least allow it. So that's what I would hope to propose. And I'm sorry I wasn't clear about that, about not requiring it.
So Councilmember Lillquist, in your mind, how would the incentive be applied, just hypothetically, to a mixed project then in this case? It would just apply to the affordable
Simply
units
say to the city that, we swear or affirm that X percent of our units, 26 out of 32 or whatever the number is, are qualify under Section 030A definition of low-income housing. I mean, they're already swearing and covenanting that 100%, they would just submit this same piece of paper which says that 80 or 60 or 40% of the units meet the requirement.
Councilmember Cotton.
So I'm interpreting your question, Councilmember Stone, and maybe this is actually a really good candidate for a work session. I don't know. Sorry, staff. My interpretation is that all the incentives would still apply to the entire project, is what you're suggesting, right? Yes.
One building of one.
You have to build one building, but if 20% were rent restricted units with an affordability covenant recorded, then the project could benefit from the flexibility this contemplates, I think is what you're suggesting, or whatever percent. I'm not sure it's worth doing 60% because I'm not sure there's anyone wanting to do that. I think, layering it on top of the MFT would make the most sense to me.
So what I would propose, there's not a formal motion on the table to amend the current motion, which was already brought forward by the Councilmembers Anderson and Huffman. But we've spoken before about that interest in, yes, how do we incentivize or make it simple for, profit developers, market rate, and people who are building permanently affordable to collaborate or work together on projects. Like, it feels like it would be the best of both worlds, but at the same time, you're asking for two very different worlds to then play in the same sandbox, and it's complicated and messy. And so, but I think there's more than a simple, brush of the pen to effectuate what you're talking about. And in light of what Tara shared about, projects in the queue that could potentially benefit from this, that would put units on the ground here in our community, I propose to move forward with the vote before us this evening and request a work session related to, I don't know on what time frame, but in thinking about, are there creative ways to get to that mixed, mixed developments when you have permanently affordable and market rate coexisting, and is there a way as a city to help to incentivize that? But if you have a particular, amendment, I just think it's going to be yes, we would all like simple solutions, and I don't think this is one that's going to be achieved tonight. But Councilmember Lillquist.
This is not a work session, but it's going to end up being one. You'll see why. I propose that we amend 2029A020, the applicability section, Section C, to read, only projects proposing at least 20% low-income housing are eligible for the incentive provisions herein.
Second.
Councilmember Lopez.
The reason I chose 20 was to bring up the discussion that was had in the Planning Commission, although I didn't listen to it, that had to do with doing it this way would layer it on with the MFTE program. That now you would not only have the MFTE program, which has the possibility of creating mixed income housing, but has never yet once done so, as Mr. Gass pointed out. Now we have a way of creating this MFTA program could potentially do that. I'm not sure it's a great idea, but I want to talk about it. This has not been talked about. This is a great topic for a work session, but I want to talk about layering these on. It may be too much. I don't know, but I want to talk about it.
Councilmember Anderson and then Huffman.
So I can't support it. 20% is too low, in my opinion, because this is about creating affordability. 20% leaves 80%, which for a for-profit developer could just blow out the whole height aspect because they can afford to go much higher. I was comfortable without a height, knowing that a majority of nonprofit, based on their funding mechanism, wouldn't be able to build higher than maybe 4 or 5 stories. A for-profit could, and I think it just opens up too much concern about where would this potentially 10 or 12-story building go and what area. And I have too many questions that I don't think today we're going to answer, and I'm just really apprehensive about not getting it passed tonight and potentially impacting the project. I'd much rather have had a motion afterwards to send it to staff to create a work session in the future that would be able to give us more details on the what-ifs and the opportunities.
Councilmember Huffman.
Thank you. I appreciate the conversation. Councilmember Rehnquist, for sure. I know that's having mixed income housing has been a topic of conversation a lot, and how we encourage that has been a topic of conversation a lot. I'm wary of this amendment only because of understanding just how complex nonprofit building is already, and the number of factors that go into building nonprofit housing, and then adding the extra complexity of the for-profit component as well into the same building. And I'm here for it. I think it's just the behind-the-scenes details and funding mechanisms and what that looks like for staff. And what is it that we as non-experts in this field don't know about those complexities, which is why it would be wonderful to have a fuller conversation about that. At this point, I would really like to get this passed, as it is something that has been poured over by staff already, asking all of those questions of complexity, and then perhaps at a later time contemplating your idea in a more full way.
Councilmember Williams.
I tend to agree with my colleague Holly Huffman in that I'm not a big prognosticator of doing things on the fly. If this is an issue that needs to be addressed, then it needs to be addressed in the right way. This has already been addressed. It's been through the hopper, and it's been recommended by the Planning Commission and the staff that we pass it. This one. Now, if there's something else down the road that we need to take a look at and go through the work and the research and everything else to make sure that what you are talking about is going to work, I'm all for that. But I'm not all for just making a motion tonight on something that's already been thought through and dealt with. So I would support the motion. No, or not your motion, the passage of this as it is written.
Councilmember Hamel.
Yeah, I understand, I think, what you're trying to do and seeing the benefits of mixed income developments. There's a body of work and evidence that supports that. I totally understand that. However, I mean, if you look at the projects that are cited here as examples, they're nonprofit developer oriented. So Cedar Commons is Opportunity Council, Millworks is Mercy, Eleanor is Mercy. And I think the planning director is correct that what we're looking at is two different business models and two different types of work products that come out of those different business models. And one thing that I'm not clear on or not certain on is a for-profit developer's ability to manage a 50-year affordability requirement as part of the project. I'm just not certain how that's going to work, or if they'd want to take on that responsibility. There's a reason why we haven't seen, I can't think of a single for-profit development in the city of Bellingham that has affordability requirements. All the ones that are, like I said, all the ones that are cited here, they're all nonprofit developers. They have expertise within that field. That is their lane, and they're very accomplished within that. So I'm not going to support the amendment. I do support passing this tonight. I think that we should, for the public benefit, come back and have a further discussion to try to understand your concept a little bit better in a future work session.
Before I go to Councilmember Anderson again, I was just going to note as well that in the motion that you made, I believe that you're just addressing subsection C, which talks about the percentage, but then subsection D states that low-income housing projects shall be operated by a qualified low-income housing provider. And so I think there will be some direct conflict there as well. But the other question that you're getting at of, yes, why haven't we seen any of those MFTE projects come forward? I mean, I think that's the bigger thing to grapple with. It's like, what is it that's going to need to come forward in order to move those projects? And so I feel like there are already mechanisms available to try and foster those projects, but it's not coming to fruition. And so there are bigger things to unpack there, I guess, at this time, I believe. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. I do see potentially a future opportunity, but I also want to make sure we get it right to make sure that it's just not something listed that never gets utilized because it's not worded where we needed, like what Council President Stone has just stated. You know, some of the language in here would really need to change, because in talking with some of our nonprofit, one, I won't throw them out there, but one of the dynamic conversations we had was there was some interest in having market rate in one of their developments, but they really had to look at a lot of different funding possibilities to make something like that happen. We also have a new nonprofit in the community that has received some substantial grants, the Future Home Buyers Organization. They just placed their first person in a condo unit for permanent affordability. So whereas we have like Colshan Land Trust that does a lot of development and building and it's all there, the FHO is partnering with either already built units, but they were also partnering with a developer who just developed, but they're going to use hopefully the tax incentive. But it'd be really nice for our planning department to have the opportunity to sit down with like FHO, and I'm not going to say the developer's name because, you know, there's a lot in the community, but maybe some of our developers, and find out how do we incentivize such partnerships where someone like FHO or even Colshan Land Trust, or perhaps unknown to me, you know, if I had another name, I'd drop it, but for an organization to be able to say, okay, we could buy 10 units with our funding for this, and then maybe expand it beyond just the tax credit, because the units would be under the nonprofit for permanent affordability. They're the ones that monitor it, and what happens with the for-profit can change hands. I could see where a model would work, but I think there's just some work and legwork that has to happen first to make sure that anything we're putting on the books will be utilized and be functional, and hopefully we will see those partnerships come out. I have hope that we have some of the pieces, but slicing it into this ordinance is not going to be the thing, I believe, that will make it happen. And I want to make sure it happens. So I do appreciate Councilmember Lilliquist bringing that forward, because it does allow us to have this discussion, and perhaps staff are aware of a desire we would like to go. But timing is also critical on it.
We have an amendment before us. If there's not further comment on the proposed amendment, I'm going to call the vote on the amendment. Councilmember Lillquist and Cotton.
You should go first.
Just to note, the definition of qualified low-income housing provider does include for-profit developers, but your point is well taken. I think this amendment would only make sense if we also amended the definition of low-income housing and removed the reference to the consolidated plan. But regardless, this motion sounds like it will fail, but I do think hopefully staff has heard 7 council members interested in pursuing this idea. But I do think, just to respond to a comment, I am more afraid of Bellingham being a place that people can't afford rather than tall buildings and multifamily zones. So just to name our priorities, I think we should be more afraid of Bellingham being a place people can't afford.
Councilmember Lillquist.
To be honest, the reason why I proposed 20% was to make sure that it got on the table for discussion, because I knew that I had a second for that. I don't think 20% is the right number. I threw out 60%, maybe 80%. That's a better number. That's the more likely thing that would work for a model for mixed development. Councilman Anderson mentioned there's somebody who's looking at mixed-use development. Well, we're going to close the door on that. We're going to take this incentive and remove it from the table so it won't be available to them. We keep talking about how this is a difficult thing and how do we make this mixed use work. We all want it. There's so much work, and Mr. Hamill referred to, which says it's a good idea. Why are we closing the door on it? Why are we creating one more barrier to mixed use? My idea is not to require programs or projects to be mixed use. It is to allow them to be mixed use if they want. But if most of the developers are nonprofits to 100% affordable, no harm, no foul, opposite of that, that's a real benefit. I'd like this program to succeed. I just don't want it to have the unintended consequence of closing the door on one of the things we keep saying we want. So I understand this is not going to pass. I would have liked to have had a discussion. I would like this to have gone to a work session. I didn't want to do this through amendments, but it's the only way I could get the discussion to continue. I think we're making a mistake. I think we're going to get lots of really good projects out of this. I'm afraid we're going to be missing a few as well. And those will be really important projects. And those projects would be incredible examples to be proud of, because the thing we've been talking about and hoping for years. And now those projects will not get this incentive, and they're even less likely to ever come our way.
Councilmember Williams.
I didn't hear a single person up here disagree with your concept. What I heard was we need to do some homework. We need to perhaps develop another ordinance similar to this or something to address the issue. I think that by voting on this tonight is not closing the door. The direction and the feeling of this council is, at least I think it is, that the issue that you are bringing up needs to be addressed. But is the best way to address it amending this or kicking it to a work session and being sure that when we do it, it's done the right way so that it will work? And like I said, I haven't heard a single person say, no, the issue should not be addressed. Just that maybe this isn't the form that it needs to be addressed in. So thank you for bringing it up and having the discussion.
So we have a motion. Councilmember Huffman.
Thank you, Council President. In answer to the closing the door comment, I would say I want to make sure to keep the door open for this specific intended purpose. You have opened a door, and you should put a doorstop in it. Perhaps once we vote on this, there is another motion that could be made to keep the conversation moving. But I think that with all of the time and effort that has gone into this ordinance as is, with some very specific purposes to add some flexibility so that we can directly impact providing some flexibility in a way that we know is going to have an effect. I think that, for me, is the priority. But I think that the conversation that you're having with us is also very important. We have the power to keep it going. So I would recommend a motion once we're done with this.
So
There is a
your comment
parliamentary.
to this
There's
amendment?
No, but it's parliamentarily
Okay, can
allowed.
you-
There's a motion which would supersede this one, which would go toward the idea of a work session, and then it would immediately come back to this one. It would do things in a certain order. The council would declare they want to have a work session to discuss mixed income housing incentives. And then that was disposed, then this motion would immediately come back on the table. If you understand this I'm doing, then you would second my motion. Otherwise, you might think I'm trying to defeat the motion, but I'm not. I'm trying to move it forward. Does anybody understand what I'm trying to say?
Yes, but is there a reason to do it now versus after this has been?
It gives me the assurance that that really is the direction we're going. And then it gives me a completely different feeling about my subsequent votes.
Are you making a motion?
A motion to table this current matter until the city council takes up the question of a work session to discuss mixed income housing incentives.
Is there a second? It's just he's moving to table it for the moment. This is my understanding, is to table this vote that is currently before us in order to hear a motion about a work session, because he doesn't trust that after this vote, we're going to move forward with consideration of a motion. He wants the assurance now, before he casts his vote on his own amendment or the underlying motion.
Thank you for speaking English for our parliamentarian. I'll second it.
Okay, so there's a motion by Councilmember Lillquist. So there's a motion from Councilmember Lillquist and a second by Councilmember Anderson to table the current discussion and to consider a motion to schedule a work session on this topic.
On mixed income housing incentives.
On mixed income housing.
Incentives?
Okay, so there is a motion to schedule a work session on mixed income housing incentives. Councilmember Williams.
I'm having a hard time understanding why you just can't make that motion. I mean, after passage of this.
But we are where we are, and I'd like to move
Yeah.
forward this evening. So, any discussion on this motion for a work session to be?
The motion is to table, then we have to make the motion. First, you have to clear this motion off, the amendment off the table, before you can talk about the work session. That's the parliamentary
But
issue.
the amendment will still be there when we come back.
Yes, because
Or you will have-
the motion to table immediately brings it back up once the event is triggered.
Okay. All in favor of tabling at this moment? Say aye. Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Seeing none, that passes 7-0. Councilmember Lillquist.
A motion the city council requests the administration to schedule at an appropriate time in the future a work session to discuss mixed income housing incentives.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Lillquist and a second by Councilmember Anderson, again, to schedule a work session on mixed income housing incentives. Any discussion on the motion? Councilmember Anderson.
I appreciate that Councilmember Lillquist did not put a date or time stamp on when it has to come back, because we all saw how much work is ahead. And then I trust that staff will look at if it can dovetail into any other work that makes sense, so we're not kind of at the end of the line. But thank you for not requesting it to come back quickly. I know.
Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, seeing none, that passes 7-0. So we'll come back to the amendment that was previously tabled, now that we've taken the action requested by the tabling motion. The amendment brought forward by Councilmember Lillquist and seconded by Councilmember Cotton is on page 13 of our packet. Under section 20.29A.202.020, applicability section, subsection C, the amendment was for it to read, only projects proposing 20% low-income housing are eligible for the incentive provisions herein. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No?
No.
Any abstentions? Okay, so I believe that passed 6-1. You ended up being a yes? Well, Cotton was a no. I heard you as a,
Yes, we were all no's.
It
You're
failed.
both no's?
No, he was a yes. We were all no's to the amendment.
so, right, so I'm saying you're voting against your amendment.
Yeah. but
Okay.
It failed 1-6. It didn't
Yes.
pass.
Okay, so that amendment fails 1-6, and that brings us to the underlying motion, which was originally brought forward, if I can find it, by Councilmember Anderson, seconded by Councilmember Hussman. That motion was to move to approve the ordinance for first and second reading. That ordinance being an ordinance relating to land use and planning, amending Title 20 of the Bellingham Municipal Code, creating a new chapter, 20.29A, titled Low Income Housing Development Incentive, closed title, removing and reducing zoning-based development regulations for low-income housing in all residential, multi-urban village, and commercial zones. Any discussion on the motion? Councilmember Hamel.
Yeah, just one clarifying question for staff. Under 20.29A.030, the definition for low-income housing, is that consistent with the Washington State Housing Trust Fund, their definition?
This was one of the items that was changed when we were heading to the Planning Commission based on feedback from the affordable housing developers. So this has been modified so that it is consistent with the trust fund and the tax credit terminology, or definitions, I should say.
Okay.
Any further questions or discussion? Any follow-up? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor will say aye. Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. Seeing none, that passes 7-0. Any further items from staff on this matter? No. Okay. Thank you very much. So that concludes the public hearing item that was before the council this evening. Next, we would move forward with appointments. And for this item, I am going to turn to Deputy Administrator Janice Keller.
Good evening. I'm presenting the appointments on behalf of Mayor Lund tonight. The first one is for information only. It's the mayor's appointment of Brandon Roundtree to a first term as the Sunnyland Neighborhood Primary Representative to the Mayor's Neighborhood Advisory Commission. The second one is a confirmation of the mayor's appointments to the Landlord and Tenant Advisory Work Group. This one is a little more substantive, and we're looking for a confirmation vote after we've had a chance to present it and discuss it. Mayor Lund presents for City Council confirmation 13 community members to be appointed to the Landlord and Tenant Advisory Work Group. We received applications from 60 people who applied to be considered for 13 positions. We were very thrilled to receive that much interest from a range of landlords, tenants, professionals working in those fields, and just really pleased that this gained so much attention after our outreach efforts. Those selected represent tenants, landlords, and community members with lived and professional experience in rental issues. Mayor Lund appoints the following inaugural members: Lizette Alberon, McLean Bowers, Stacy Carroll, Nathan Cathersall, Margot Hammond, Selena Knobloch, Lacey Lutemeyer, Charlie Myers, Bailey Peterson, Kevin Schilling, Rebecca Scharf, Jessica Silver, and Kimberly Vermeulen. I was not involved in the application review or the interview process that resulted in the selection of these folks. I'd like to invite Planning Director Blake Lyon up to talk a little bit more about that process. Thank you, Blake.
Thank you and good evening. Yes, as Janice mentioned, we had an abundance of riches in terms of the applicants that came forward. And, it's unfortunate that 47 people were not able to be selected, but certainly very appreciative of everybody's interest and the statements they do that. We started first and foremost with the resolution that the council passed. You may recall that there was kind of several different categories within that resolution that asked for some tenant representation, some landlord and or property management representation, some community interest. And we went through those that identified and broke them out into those groups. We also took the opportunity, as we do with the Planning Commission, where we try to look for, and best practices, look for a broad geographic representation across the city, so it's not all from one particular neighborhood, that there is a distribution across those. And then we looked at some of the statements of interest that were brought forward to see what other kind of self-disclosed areas of interest that they might have. And we looked in particular for voices that have not historically been represented in this community. And so we saw folks that were brave and offered up some of their lived experiences and shared with some of those. And so we made recommendations to the mayor based on kind of a broad category of consideration, and then factored into that some of the overall group dynamics. As we were working with the selection of our professional facilitator, that was a little bit of the deliberation that came as well. So we put forward some recommendations to the mayor.
Thank you, Blake.
Thank you very much. So again, this confirmation of the mayor's appointments to the Landlord and Tenant Advisory Work Group is up for consideration and approval by the council.
So move
Second?
to confirm the mayor's appointments to this working group. I move to confirm the mayor's appointments to the Landlord and Tenant Advisory Group.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Williams and a second by Councilmember Lillquist. Any discussion? Councilmember Huffman and then Anderson.
Thank you to the 60 people who were interested and applied. That's pretty amazing that there were so many people willing to spend their time doing this, serving their community. And one thing that really struck me is that looking through these names, I recognized maybe one. And I think that's fantastic, knowing that there are people out there who are not necessarily engaging with the city right now, don't know us personally even, and will be bringing their perspectives and knowledge and hard work to this group. So I really appreciate that. And also thanks to the staff members that spent the time going through all of these applications. That's a lot. It's a lot of work, and I'm sure there were a lot of really good applicants. So there were some tough decisions.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. I'm unfortunately not going to be able to support this tonight. It's not about the people who have come forward. I really appreciate the 60 people interested and the people who have been appointed. I have a lot of respect for people willing to donate their time and effort. One of the reasons why I can't support this isn't so much who has been selected, but who has not. We have a community advocate who is one of the reasons why this group has been formed. They've been at the dais talking. They've been in people's office advocating. Carrie Burnside has been just a stalwart of working with council and the city when it comes to tenants' rights and tenant protections. And just for those who aren't familiar, probably people watching, she is part of the Whatcom Housing Alliance Policy Task Force, Whatcom County Housing Advisory Committee, Bellingham Tenants Union, City of Bellingham Office of Healthy Housing Feasibility Study Task Force, Rental Registry Matrix. She's worked directly with staff regarding the rental registry and making improvements. She has talked with people on both sides of the junk fee ordinance and advocated for better policy. She's brought the law advocates and dispute resolution professionals together to do know your right training for renters and for landlords. She has been here many times talking about policy and things that we can make improvements on. She started a nonprofit with a couple other of our housing advocates, the Future Homebuyer Organization. So she has brought in potentially $1 million into our community to help low-income first-time home buyers. And they just had their first signing of their first purchase a week ago. She's been invited recently to speak at at Western Washington University to do a lecture series on the housing crisis and issues facing tenants. On a state level, she's been part of the Washington Housing Alliance, and she's the legislative district lead for the 40th and 42nd regarding the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance. She's worked with Representative Gregerson's team on the statewide junk fee legislation. She's consulted Mayor Kathy Wilson's office regarding the Bellingham junk fee ordinance and the perhaps adoption there. She has been invited to signing with our current governor for low-income housing. She's down in Olympia advocating for legislation. I could go on. I just wanted a few things that I was able to write down that she's been involved in. And I know it's important to have new voices, but we have a person who doesn't even live in our community. They live in Seattle, Kevin Schilling being appointed, who lives in Seattle. I know we passed the ability to have people outside of our area. I really thought that was when there wasn't qualified people eligible to be on a committee to serve. So we are bringing somebody in who is part of the RHAWA, who represents the needs of prospective 60,000 small rental housing providers. I can't imagine we didn't have a small housing provider who would have applied, who could have been speaking, who lives in this community and has direct impact on those rental experiences. But instead, we're appointing the communication and advocacy manager for a large represented group. It seems a little disproportionate for me. I'm just really disappointed that somebody in this community who worked really hard to get this in front of us, who has such a vast experience of advocating for both sides, and who has a very strong knowledge of our legislation that is on the books, who is known to be somebody who collaborates. So I'm just really greatly disappointed, and because of that, as much as I really appreciate 12 of the applicants and think that they'll bring a lot of good things forward, I just in my conscience can't, as a council member, feel like I'm slighting somebody in our community who has worked so hard to better our community and the living situations for the people who rent in our community.
Councilmember Williams?
Wow. I just want to say that I welcome this committee moving forward. I know it's been in the works for quite a while, and I see this being able to give us the information that we need to make durable decisions to improve our rental community. And hopefully we'll see some of those recommendations coming our way. So, is there any more comment? I guess that's your question.
Any other comments from council members? Councilmember Lillquist.
Yeah, this idea was proposed and supported by the City Council quite a while ago, and so I'm very much excited to see them start their work. There were some surprises in here. Councilmember Anderson pointed to one of those surprises, but there were mostly pleasant surprises. As Councilmember Huthman said, I didn't know most of these people. I think I knew two of them for sure, and then I thought about it, and I'd actually talked to a third person, but these are some new faces to the table, and I really appreciate that. In particular, I want to express my appreciation and my gratitude to the renters on this committee, Jessica B., Selena, Nathan McLean. I think those are the important voices which we've been missing and which we really need need, and I would like them to be strongly represented in this advisory work group to help inform us in our work going forward. We've done a lot of work on renter issues, but we've been doing it not always in the same way, a little bit ad hoc, some good here, some good there. It'll be nice to have an advisory body as a touchstone to create maybe some consistency and some perspective on it. So I will be supporting this work, these people being proposed to the work group and it getting its work started.
Just to speak to Councilmember Anderson's comments, I have great respect for Carrie Burnside, much appreciation for, the long list, as you said, could go on, her engagement in the community, here locally and beyond. I feel, though, that, right, as evidenced by your comments, she's highly engaged already, certainly knows how to access the city system and process, and I don't expect Carrie's voice to be silenced, going forward, and would expect to, continue to hear from her, but am excited to have this, when we talk about sort of building a table and trying to expand our, impact in the community as well as the engagement in the community, and making sure that in a city of 100,000 people that we have voices at the table that we haven't heard from, and making sure that they feel welcome coming forward, and especially as you commented, Director Lyon, sharing their lived experience, and hopefully that will cultivate even more advocates in our community to help move forward our efforts for improved landlord and tenant protections, as well as the future ordinances and resolutions and work that we will bring forward. And I would have trouble making this about one person. Again, I feel like in a city of 100,000 people, there are many, many voices that we don't hear from that I would like to hear from in the future. So for those reasons, I will be supporting the motion. Again, we have a motion from Councilmember Williams and a second from Councilmember Lillquist. The motion is to confirm the mayor's appointments to the Landlord and Tenant Advisory Work Group. If there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor will say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
No.
Any abstentions? Okay. So that passes 5-2. Correct? Okay. That passes 5-2 with Councilmembers Anderson and Cotton voting no. Okay. Any further appointments, Deputy Keller?
No, and no mayor's report tonight.
Okay.
Thank you.
So then we will move forward with the council assignment reports. Any updates from council members? Councilmember Hamel?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I'll be brief here since we're long here this evening. So I serve on the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force for Whatcom County, the chair of the Behavioral Health Committee. And as part of my duties there, I toured Lummi Nation's SWIMS facility, so that's Secure Withdrawal Management and Stabilization Facility. It's new, it's not open yet, it opens next week, and it's a 16-bed facility currently, and it has an involuntary treatment and a voluntary treatment component to it. It is, it could be a model for the upcoming future behavioral care center for the county. It's trauma-informed design, it's very well done. Staff 24/7, admittance 24/7 as well. Just want to highlight that. You can look it up online too and you see some photos there and get further information. I also serve on the EMS Levy Committee and the EMS Oversight Board. For the EMS Levy Committee, I serve on the Community Paramedic Planning Team. We just started, so I don't have a lot to update the public and council with regarding community paramedic. But it is part of the EMS Levy Plan. We're trying to figure out how to provide service delivery throughout the county within that program. And many of you will recall that the EMS levy originally was intended for ALS, which is advanced life support, but it did branch out to basic life support, community paramedicine, training, a number of different items, but I just want to provide that report tonight.
Councilmember Williams and then Anderson.
Yeah, I was invited to participate in a tour of homes and businesses last week regarding the home electrification appliance rebate program. This was organized by the mayor's climate office, Seth Vidania, and Sustainable Connections and the Opportunity Council. We toured several homes and several non-profit agencies to get an idea of what services these entities were provided with to update their heating and electrification issues that they were having. We were also accompanied by several people from the State Department of Commerce in looking at these homes and businesses. Besides the individual homes that receive this service, there are several non-profit organizations that are also being served, such as the Whatcom Center for Early Learning, Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Services, Lydia Place and Bridget Collins, and the Tadeos Restaurant, which is a locally owned minority business in our downtown sector. The funding for this program comes from the Washington's Climate Commitment Act, but the specific funding for Whatcom County and Bellingham is a grant from the Washington Department of Commerce and is locally administered by the Opportunity Council and Sustainable Connections. Anyway, it was a very, for lack of a better word, enlightening experience, and I learned a lot by seeing all this. The other thing I wanted to talk about is I went to, as I usually do, to our Parks and Recreation Committee meetings and our Greenways meetings. And the main focus of those meetings, at least in the last month or so, has been to identify the capital program priorities for the 2027 budget, such as the pier at Little Squalicum Park, the Wharf Street Trail, Salish Landing, Greenways land acquisition, and so forth. And the program priorities were discussed with the Parks and Recreation staff at the meeting, with final committee recommendations referred to them. And then the staff will review all this, develop funding levels for each program, and eventually that will be presented to us for inclusion in the 2027 budget. In that time, too, I also asked the committee leadership about the process for merging the two committees. And as I spoke to them, I was really glad to hear that they felt that the process was moving forward in a very positive way, and that the fundamental standard they both spoke to me about is the purpose is broadening the understanding among members, all of the members, regarding the total Parks and Recreation program and not just their individual piece of the pie. And in that, it doesn't mean that each programmatic focus goes away or is prioritized over the other, but it's broadened to a larger group with a unified vision and understanding for all of the areas and programs of our Parks and Recreation department. And to guarantee some consistency, the current members of each committee will be grandfathered into the new structure until their term expires, with a gradual transition to the new committee structure. So I thought that was a pretty good conversation I had. So, all that being said, I had a busy week.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. I have a couple of things. I failed to mention at our last council meeting that on August 6th, attended the Marine Resource Committee, and it's a group of state, local, environmental, educational resource group that talks a lot about what's happening in our marine area. And what was really educational about that meeting is that there were 2 interns from Bellingham Technical College that had provided educational outreach over the summer down at Larrabee Park, where the boat launch is, and basically educating the community about the eelgrass there and the impacts, trying to make sure that people do their boat launches and the soft launch of their personal watercrafts, that they're not walking on the eelgrass because of the habitat, but they also came forward with some recommendations. Another interesting thing was that the GIS specialist for Padilla Bay National Estuary is, there is a data resource, a GIS, that is available, so you can, I don't have their website here. I think it's called Sound IQ. So if you want to kind of geek out on things that are happening in the marine area, the Sound IQ is actually, they were showing us how to use it. And if you want to take a look at the islands or see what studies are happening and what resources are available, that is something that you can spend some evening reviewing. So this group is pretty fascinating. I'm learning quite a bit. I wish, well, their meetings are, I believe, open to the public, and we meet on, our next meeting will be on Thursday, September 3rd from 5 to 7, and it's held in the garden room at the county building. So if you want to learn more about marine resources and what they're up to, it is open to the public, and it's always educational. The other thing I wanted to cover is on Thursday, this past Thursday, August 20th, the Planning Committee hosted a joint meeting with the Planning Commission, where staff were able to present to us basically everything that's in the hopper when it comes to a lot of the work that is going forward. So we kind of got a 3 to 5 year perspective of legislative things that will be moving forward. So at least I would ask, because I failed to ask, but if there was some slides that were presented, if it might be useful to send to all of council, because some of the graphics showed how far we are in projects, what is starting, and when things should be coming forward to council. And I think that's why I thanked Councilmember Lillquist, who was in attendance, and so was Councilmember Huthman, and I believe Councilmember Cotton joined us online. It gives us a pretty good layout of the work plan, and our planning department is doing quite a tremendous lift over the next couple of years. So I think it would be very useful to have that forwarded over. Kudos to staff. It's always impressive to see everything, if not exhausting and daunting to realize the work that you guys have in front of you. So thank you.
Any other updates from council members? Okay. Seeing none, I want to gauge we are at 8:30. 5-minute break or go forward with report outs? We're at a, okay. Next, we have report outs from committee meetings earlier today. So the first committee was Budget and Finance. That committee was chaired by Councilmember Anderson, so I will turn it over to her for a report.
Thank you, Council President. We had 3 items in front of us today. Joining me was Councilmember Hamel and Councilmember Lillquist. Our first agenda item was 25016, which was a presentation that provided a summary of the city's financial position through the second quarter of 2026. The June 2026 financial report was attached to the agenda bill and provides detailed information related to the 6-month period. The presentation and additional financial information is available on the city's website at cob.org/reports. Something basically to share coming out of that report is that currently the city has about 39 positions that are currently frozen, which has basically helped with holding off some of our potential overage and having to go into our reserves. Some of the good news is that our revenue tax has gone up a little bit by, I think it was 1.2 million, which is helping. There's no crystal ball, but the hope is that we won't be too far over budget. If not, hopefully we'll be kind of flatlined. And it was, if anybody's interested, please go to the day session. We started at 1 o'clock today. It should be available on BT 10 sometime tomorrow, but it was very informative of where the city budget is currently, and that one was for information and discussion only. Our second item was item number 25015. It was an ordinance amending the 2026 budget. It is our third amendment. The amendment increased revenues by $4,092,873 and expenditures by $22,189,674 across multiple departments and funds to ensure sufficient budget authority is providing for existing upcoming programs and projects and to cover higher than anticipated costs. There was a lined section in there, some of the general fund allotments total $1.6 million and change. A big chunk of that was $1.2 million for higher than expected medical claims. $200,000 for a remodel of in City Hall, the old Parks and Recreation Suite, which will be renovated to house our Human Resources Department, who has vacated out of the federal building so that we could, in the future, move our municipal courts there. The hearing examiner is having an overage. The hearing examiner has had some rather large, detailed, complex appeals and hearings, and so we are raising that, hopefully with this vote, for $150,000. There are other funds that are also listed. I just kind of wanted to give some of those highlights. But the committee voted 3-0 to move approval of the budget amendment, and I so move.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Anderson and a second by Councilmember Hamel. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. Seeing none, that passes 7-0.
Great. And I failed to mention on those two, the first one was presented by our finance director, Andy Asbjornsen, and our second one with the budget amendment was presented by our budget and treasury manager, Eric Johnson. So our third item, which was presented by our director for Planning and Community Development, Blake Lyon, and also Kurt Nabefeld, is Agenda Item 25014, a resolution amending the City of Bellingham land use and application fee schedule. The city has not updated the land use application fee schedule since its adoption in 2007, and fee revenue is no longer keeping pace with the cost of service. In an effort to bring the fee schedule into alignment with current expenditures, the land use application fee schedule, Exhibit B in our packet, has been revised to account for the inflation and include an annual adjustment based on the Consumer Price Index. The proposed fee schedule would go into effect October 1st, 2026. The revenue generated from this adjustment will in part be used for a fund to market study to help inform future adjustment fee schedules as well as cost recovery. There was great discussion, and before I move, there was, let me bring it up here if I can bring it. Oh, Lord. There was an amendment, and they were so kind to send it to me. So I guess for order, do I bring forward the amendment first, vote on that?
Bring
and
forward the committee's recommendation.
Okay. So the committee recommended 3-0, and I so move.
Second.
Okay. So with that, there was an amendment made.
So the motion during the committee was to
Yes.
move approval as amended. So the
Okay.
amendment was adopted, but you could read the amendment into
Okay.
the record tonight, so that
Thank
it's
you.
included.
I didn't know if we all had to vote on the amendment. So reading into the record the amendment, move to amend the resolution adding the new section 3 entitled City Council Review that states, at some time before first half of 2032, city staff shall bring forward the land application fee schedule for review by city council. The discussion was that we would like to have this come forward at some point to review, and staff pointed out that the additional revenue that will be generated by the increased fee is going to help pay for someone to do a market study. That information should come forward, and at that point, we'll be able to either amend or change, and that will be the report out. The amendment was kind of, I feel, like a placeholder to ensure that should something happen and we don't get a timely study and recommendations coming forward, at least we'd get a report back in the near future. So again, the committee voted 3-0, and again, I move.
Yep, so there was a motion this evening then from Councilmember Anderson, seconded by Councilmember Hamel, again to move to approve the resolution as amended. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, seeing none, that passes 7-0.
End of committee.
Thank you very much. The next committee this afternoon was Parks and Recreation. That committee is chaired by Councilmember Williams, so I will turn it over to him for a report.
All right, thank you, President Stone. We had 2 items on our agenda. Both were dealing with the new park off of Baker View Road that is going to be developed in the next year or so, the 10 or 15 years. Anyway, the first item was Agenda Bill 25021, which was dealing with the recommendation of a name for the park. So at the June Parks and Recreation Advisory Board meeting, the Parks and Recreation staff shared the results of the public naming poll for this new park on East Bakerview Road. Some of the names that were suggested were Bellinghamster Park, Como Culshan Park, Telegraph Trail Park, Culshan Meadows, and King Mountain Park, and so forth. And then there was there were some other names recommended by staff, one of which was, where is it? Bakerview Meadows Park, Telegraph Trail, and so forth. Some of the same names. So at the end of the discussion, the Parks and Recreation Board and the staff recommended to name the park Bakerview Meadows Park. So after a brief presentation by Nicole Oliver, the Parks and Recreation Director, and Peter Gill, going over all of the nominated names, the staff and the advisory committee recommended Bakerview Meadows Park. The council committee concurred, and I so move.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Williams and a second by Councilmember Hamel. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Seeing none, that passes 7-0.
Okay, the other agenda bill that we had was number 25026, which was a consideration of the Bakerview Meadows Park Master Plan. As we have said, the park is located between Telegraph and Bakerview on east of Deemer Road. The property was purchased in 2020 for a neighborhood park in expanding an undeserved part of our city. The master plan that was being presented today is a culmination of 2 years of work with local residents and the community to design and phase the 26-acre space for use as a park, while holding a portion along Bakerview for future low-income housing. The park is intended to be completed in phases over the next 5 years, with access and temporary trails available immediately, but full implementation of the master plan will take about 10 to 15 years and will be phased in over that time frame as funding is available. So the estimates are $75,000 for phase 0, which is current, $6 million for phase 1, and $7 million for phase 2 and beyond. After a very, very enlightening presentation by Parks Director Nicole Oliver and Peter Gill, Park Planning and Development Coordinator, along with the landscape architect Leslie Batten from Field Collab LLC, they explained to us that the plan itself reflects the results of a vast public outreach program from 700 participants in that community that will be serviced by this park. The overarching direction is to maintain the natural habitat of the park and provide areas for many recreational activities over time, such as having a community garden, a children's playground, and an adult exercise area, ongoing disc golf targets, and several other amenities that'll be phased in over time as the funding permits. So, both the Parks and Recreation Board and the Parks and Recreation staff recommended approval of this master plan, and the committee concurred, and I so move.
Second. Motion's been made by Councilmember Williams and a second by Councilmember Huffman. Any discussion? Councilmember Huffman.
I watched the meeting today, although I wasn't here, and maybe in my next life I'll be a park planner because that sounds like so much fun. It's like real life, getting to make trails and move dirt around. But I remember my first being on council and looking at a map of the city and Nicole Oliver, Director Nicole Oliver, talking about how we had such a void in the north end of Bellingham when it came to parks. And then I also got to be in a meeting when Nicole Oliver got to be so excited that we were buying this property and we would get to have this park and the potential. And so it's really fun now to see that there is a plan and that this park is going to be realized and it's going to be amazing, and that so many people have provided input for this vision. I think that that's also really incredible. It's going to be something that the community is going to be really proud of. So I'm very excited that this continues to move along.
I just want to add.
Councilmember Lillquist and then Williams.
Yeah, I echo a lot of the feelings that Councilmember Huffman. I do remember when this came forward. I do remember being excited that it addressed a gap in our system. I also remember that when this came forward, the City Council directed the staff to look at carving out part of the property for low-income housing, and that has been achieved. That land has been identified. I think it's an extraordinary statement of values that we provide that kind of housing to next to what would be one of our finest parks. I note that this master plan leans heavily on trails, because that's what the public wanted. That's not a surprise to me, and I'm really pleased to see there'll be multi-use trails for people with multiple abilities, both smaller natural trails and bigger paved trails. I think that's going to be great. It's what the public wanted, in addition to other park amenities. I also appreciate that it has natural play spaces along with play equipment and sports courts, because that's been a recognized trend as a kind of a best practice for how to get people, especially young people, actively playing. Give them some ambiguity, give them some nature to climb upon, and even a climbing area so you can get your vertical thrills out too. And I'm also really pleased that there's a phase 0 activation phase. So it'll take a while before heavy work begins and the culvert can be breached with road access and things like that. But there's a phase 0, an activation phase that's going to occur right away. And I very much appreciate that, and that there are trails even in that early phase 0 as well as in the other phases. Those are all wonderful features of this, the Bakerview Meadows, got to memorize that, Bakerview Meadows Park Master Plan, in which I will be enthusiastically voting yes.
Councilmember Williams?
Yeah, the only thing I want to really highlight is the responses from the community. Getting 700 people to give you input as to what this park should reflect is is something that we should be very, very proud of, because to me, that's how parks should be developed, by what the local community wants to see. And I think that a very fine job was done in getting that info. Having it phased in over a period of time is good, because it gives us a chance to kind of see what'll work maybe and what might not work or might not work as we saw it. But I remember dealing with this piece of land, I believe, the first year I was on the city council. And now it's coming to fruition, and I'm very proud that we are doing that and making this happen.
Any other discussion on the motion? Okay. Seeing none, we have a motion from Councilmember Williams and a second by Councilmember Huffman to move to approve the Bakerview Meadows Master Plan. All in favor will say aye. Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. Seeing none, that passes 7-0.
So we had no further business, so I adjourn the meeting, and I'll pass it back over to you.
Thank you very much. So the next committee meeting this afternoon was Public Health, Safety, Justice, and Equity. That committee is chaired by Councilmember Hamel, so I will turn it over to him for a report.
Thank you, Council President Stone. I was joined this afternoon by Council Members Williams and Huffman. We had 3 items before us. First was Agenda Bill 25028. This is an interlocal agreement with the City of Blaine for public safety data sharing. This interlocal agreement authorizes the City of Blaine Police Department to share limited records management system data with Watcom 911. That's our call center. Watcom public safety telecommunicators will receive read-only access to the names file in Blaine's records management system to support person checks and provide more efficient service to Blaine officers and the other agencies that they assist. The agreement does not allow the Blaine Police Department access to Bellingham Police Department records. Each party remains responsible for its own costs, and the agreement does not authorize the expenditure or collection of funds. I'd also like to add that these agreements here are all consistent with the Keep Washington Working Act, and Watcom Deputy Director Justin Rasmussen was here this afternoon to provide us a briefing on these agenda items, and he's here this evening. Thanks for joining us, appreciate it. This afternoon, the committee voted to approve this interlocal agreement, and I so move.
Second.
Motion was made by Councilmember Hamel and a second by Councilmember Williams. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, seeing none, that passes 7-0.
The second item is Agenda Bill 25029. This was an interlocal agreement with the City of Ferndale for public safety data sharing. I'm not going to read the summary statement. It's exactly what I just read before for the City of Blaine. And the committee voted to approve, and I so move.
Second.
Motion was made by Councilmember Hamel and a second by Councilmember Williams. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, seeing none, that passes 7-0.
The third and final agenda was a bill was 25030. This is an interlocal agreement with the City of Linden for public safety data sharing. Again, same summary statement. This afternoon, the committee moved to approve, and I so move.
Second.
Motion was made by Councilmember Hamel and a second by Councilmember Huthman. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Seeing none, that passes 7-0.
End of committee report.
Thank you very much. The next committee this afternoon was Committee of the Whole. All council members were present this afternoon. The first agenda item before the committee was Agenda Bill 25023. This is a resolution establishing the docket of proposed amendments to be reviewed in the 2026 Comprehensive Plan Amendment Cycle. So proposed amendments added to the annual docket will be reviewed using a Type 6 process, including public hearings on the merits before the Planning Commission and the City Council. Following a recommendation by the Planning Commission, the City Council will have an opportunity later this year to approve, modify, or deny each request using the criteria in Bellingham Municipal Code Title 20.20.040. We were joined this afternoon by Chris Behe, Long Range Planning Manager, as well as Blake Lyon, Planning and Community Development Director. Just noting, so there were 7 items that are being placed on the docket. One is sort of a classic rezone being brought forward by the county, and also other just cleanup items, really sort of errors and things that need to be cleaned up since the passage of that plan. Just wanting to highlight that there, as far as the agenda going forward and next steps, we are anticipating that these items then will come back before the City Council for a work session November 2nd, so later this year. Then a public hearing proposed to be held on November 16th with council consideration of the ordinance for first and second reading on December 7th and potential third and final on December 14th. So this afternoon, there was a unanimous recommendation from the committee to move to approve the resolution, and I so move.
Second.
Motion's been made by the chair and a second by Councilmember Hamel. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none. All in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, seeing none, that passes 7-0. The next item before the committee was Agenda Bill 25022. This was a discussion of tenant engagement options. So earlier this year, the council directed staff to research options for tenant engagement similar to the landlord and property manager survey that was conducted in the fall of last year, 2025. After considering options, a digital survey was identified as the recommended engagement strategy. As noted earlier with the appointments that came forward from the mayor's team, the administration is also taking steps to convene the Landlord and Tenant Advisory Working Group. So at this time this afternoon, council staff was seeking direction for next steps on tenant engagement. We were joined by legislative policy analyst Iris Knott, as well as Blake Lyon, who is the Planning and Community Development Director for the city. Basically, the question and direction before the council was consideration of whether to move forward with the survey at this time under sort of council direction that would go forward with assistance and support from our legislative policy analyst, Iris Knott, And then whatever results are brought forward, right, the data collected from that survey, that could be shared with the work group, with the Landlord and Tenant Advisory Work Group for further consideration and analysis, or delaying that survey until the Landlord and Tenant Advisory Work Group had an opportunity to sort of lay out a more robust and perhaps in-depth engagement proposal for landlord and tenant surveys maybe in the future. So this afternoon, there was a motion from the council to move forward with option 1. So this is a digital engagement strategy is the recommendation, and to move forward with that this fall. So again, the motion from the council was to move forward at this time and then to share the data collected with the working group for consideration. So I will move at this time to move forward with option 1 this fall.
Second.
Motion was made by the chair and a second by Councilmember Williams. Any discussion on that motion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, seeing none, that passes 7-0. The next item before Committee of the Whole was Agenda Bill 25024. This was a discussion of upcoming procedural changes to council meetings. So Council President Hannah Stone, myself, reviewed planned changes to council meetings, including adjustments to public comment, standing announcements, and language access. So this afternoon during committee, just highlighting, taking them in order, so changes to public comment. We are looking to implement changes at the next council meeting, which again will be on September 14th. So at that council meeting, moving public comment to the start of the meeting. That will be a 30-minute block with individuals providing comment for 2 minutes each. With respect to the standing announcements, a couple of changes. One regarding the land acknowledgement, deferring to a special project report that was brought forward regarding city and tribal relations and engagement. That was highlighting sort of the need for the city of Bellingham to work as a unified entity with the local tribes to develop a formal land acknowledgement if that were to be adopted by the city, but acknowledging that the tribes really function at a level higher than the council, and that the tribes would defer to have that engagement and discussion directly with the mayor. So really for the council to defer to the mayor's office and the administration to carry that work forward. With respect to language access, so in lieu of budget considerations, as well as how intentionally we are reaching out to and engaging with members of the community for whom English may be a second language for them, acknowledging that we have, so moving the public comment to the beginning of the meeting as well will ensure that public comment and the broader meeting is all live streamed through BTV and Comcast Channel 10, as well as on YouTube. So acknowledging although AI generated certainly technology advancements, the ability to then watch recordings of all meetings, not just the evening regular meetings, in multiple languages. At this time, YouTube has English plus more than 150 languages available that allow for audio dubbing as well as voiceover, in addition to closed captioning or subtitles in any of those languages. In addition, the City of Bellingham website, allows translation of all the pages on our website in English as well as over 40 languages. So that being available in multiple languages, as well as the COB meetings website, those support meeting materials from council meetings being available in translations of multiple languages. I want to highlight also that the city has a contract with Language Line, and that Language Line offers even a much higher number of languages, over 350 languages available. So the city has a contract with Language Line that allows any employee of the city to call and obtain live interpretation in any of those languages sort of on demand. So really wanting to utilize the interpretation services that we have available in a much more deliberate and sort of intentional way. So through our work plan, our communications work plan as a council, wanting to ensure that there are opportunities. Part of that work plan is looking at invitations for council members and the council perhaps as a whole to attend specific, events and or meetings or programming in the community, as well as opening, office hours in council chambers or in our council office, which would allow for, interpretation on an as-needed basis. But wanting to make sure that members of the community know that we will provide interpretation upon request. So wanting to ensure that not only Spanish, but any language or ASL that the community may need, you can contact the council office, to make those arrangements. We would request ideally 48 hours notice to give us, more opportunity to ensure that we're able to meet that as best we can. But certainly, even if it was a last-minute request, we would potentially use the language line contract that we have or other accommodations. But in addition, so with the public comment moving to the start of the meeting and those changes to our standing announcements and language access, one of the pieces before consideration this afternoon were some changes to our rules of procedure. And so those rules of procedure, those changes just reflect what will be implemented next meeting. So again, moving that council public comment period to the beginning of the meeting, having that change from 15 minutes to 30 minutes in our procedural rules and from 3 minutes to 2 minutes. There were some other changes that were fully read into the record this afternoon, but most of them are somewhat just semantics about how that is outlined in the rules. Wanting to make sure that also the council knew, right, these proposed changes at this time are just related to the public comment period, but that a more comprehensive proposal for a refresh of our rules of procedure will be coming forward in the short term. So there was a motion from the council to move to approve the changes to the rules of procedure, and I so move.
Second.
Motion's been made by the chair and a second by Councilmember Williams. Just wanting to note that that was a split vote this afternoon. Actually, in the packet this evening, there are the minutes from the July 27th meeting, which is when we did consider the changes to or the implementation of our council communications work plan. And just noting that that did pass unanimously, 6-0 with Councilmember Huthman absent. But that does not have to influence the vote this evening. I know that, so just for context, when the communications plan was adopted by the council, there was a motion by Councilmember Lilliquist, supported by Councilmember Anderson, to retain the 3-minute time allotted to speakers, and that amendment failed 2-4, and then adoption of the work plan as a whole passed 6-0, but in Councilmember Huthman's absence. So just wanting to clear up the record from this afternoon's discussion in committee. But we have a motion before us then to adopt the changes to rules of procedure. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor will say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Any abstentions? Okay. Seeing none, so that passes 6-1 with Councilmember Lilliquist opposed. Okay. Next we have old and new, which this afternoon we had Director Lyons speak to an item related to the 120-day notice. And I wasn't sure if Councilmember Cotton or Lilliquist wanted to speak at all to what that resolved, that follow-up. My interpretation was that it was a non-issue, but if there's anything you wanted to share from that.
Yes. Director Lyon and Julia Burns, the rental inspection manager, shared an update that resolved our concern around conforming with state requirements around notices of non-renewal. And also just to note, we received an email asking about the concern around the language adopting the state exemption for basically public housing units. And just to clarify, that is consistent with state law and is really really applying to when tenants' income is fluctuating or the rent is fluctuating as a result of their income in a public housing project. It's not, a landlord in the private market would still need to provide a 120-day notice, even if their tenant is on a housing choice voucher. So just those two pieces of clarity, and as was noted after this afternoon, if you have questions, the Residential Landlord-Tenant Act can unfortunately sometimes be complicated, and it's always recommended to consult an attorney.
Thank you very much. Other items this evening for old and new? Okay. If not, we had executive session this afternoon. There were multiple items discussed. So in executive session, the first item was a potential property acquisition. This was with Rosenblatt. Staff provided information on a potential Lake Whatcom watershed property acquisition. It was for information and discussion only, and there was no action taken. The second item was also a potential property acquisition with Rosenblatt. Staff provided information on a potential Lake Whatcom watershed property acquisition, with the following action coming forward. So I will now entertain a motion to authorize the mayor to close the real estate transaction with the property owner, Daniel Gibney, with a purchase price of $2,500.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Anderson and a second by Councilmember Lillquist. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor will say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Seeing none, that passes 7-0. The next item is a litigation matter, Oldham versus City of Bellingham et al. This was with Phillips. Staff provided information on a litigation matter. The following action is coming forward. I will now entertain a motion to authorize the mayor to enter into a settlement agreement with Julie Oldham with the following terms: dismissal of Oldham v. City of Bellingham et al., Whatcom County Superior Court Cause Number 23-2-00618-37 in exchange for the payment of $115,000 to Julie Oldham, plus reimbursement of $3,000 in mediation costs to GLP Attorneys, PS Incorporated.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Hamel and a second by Councilmember Huthman. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor will say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstentions? Seeing none, that passes 7-0. The fourth and final item was a potential litigation matter. This was with Chaplin and Cram. Staff provided information on a potential litigation matter. The following action is coming forward. I will now entertain a motion to authorize the mayor to retain outside counsel to represent the city in litigation challenging the Federal Office of Management and Budget's proposed rule regarding federal grant conditions.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Anderson and a second by Councilmember Huthman. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, seeing none, that passes 7-0. Next, we have consent agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion was made by Councilmember Hamel and a second by Councilmember Williams. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Seeing none, that passes 7-0. Final consideration of ordinances.
Agenda Bill 24999, an ordinance related to the preservation of landmark trees and extending for an additional 6 months the interim development regulations with respect to landmark trees throughout the city.
Third and final.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Hamel and a second by Councilmember Huthman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Holly Huthman.
Aye.
Dan Hamel.
Aye.
Skip Williams.
Aye.
Lisa Anderson.
Aye.
Michael Lillquist.
Aye.
Jay Scotton. Anna Stone.
Aye.
The motion passes 7-0. Next up, we have Agenda Bill 25012, an ordinance amending BMC 6.15 and BMC 2.21.010 regarding the rental registration and safety inspection program, and Chapter 6.12 BMC regarding rental agreements.
Move third and final. I'll second it.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Anderson and a second by Councilmember Lillquist. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor will say, nope. Roll call, please.
Holly Huffman.
Aye.
Dan Hamel.
Aye.
Skip Williams.
Aye.
Lisa Anderson.
Aye.
Michael Lillquist.
Aye.
Jace Cotton. Hannah Stone.
Aye.
The motion passes 7-0. And finally, we have Agenda Bill 25006, an ordinance regarding the 1% for Art program, amending Bellingham Municipal Code Chapter 4.92.
Third and final.
Second. Motion's been made by Councilmember Hamel and a second by Councilmember Huffman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Holly Huffman.
Aye.
Dan Hamel.
Aye.
Skip Williams.
Aye.
Lisa Anderson.
Aye.
Michael Lillquist.
Aye.
Jace Cotton. Hannah Stone.
Aye.
The motion passes 7-0.
Thank you very much. So that concludes the regular business of the meeting. Noting again that our next meeting will be on September 14th. So as I said, that concludes the regular business of the meeting, and we will now move to the public comment period. If you're watching live online or on BTV, the broadcast will now end. However, you can continue watching via Zoom at cob.org/CCZoom or listen via phone by dialing 253-215-8782 and entering meeting ID 871-5188-5205 and password 9. Again, that's cob.org/CCZoom or dial 253-215-8782 and enter meeting ID 871-5188-5205 and password 9 to continue to watch or listen live. If you're watching a recorded version of this meeting, you can view public comment videos at meetings.cob.org.